Calm down, dog. Ruby, say hi to the audience. Such a cute dog. Chasing deer. Oh man, it's beautiful out here. Check out these woods. Really nice day. Hey, what's up, everybody? How you doing? Just another beautiful day out in the woods with the dog. Thought we'd talk to a few folks about some updates. Watched a really interesting video today by Owen Jones. I want to talk about that. Because this is a subject that I've really worked hard to try to better understand. And a report came out that might really shed some clarity on some things that we've been wondering for a while. So I thought I'd share that with everybody briefly. How you doing, Inch? Good to see you. Out here with Ruby. Ruby, say hi. Ruby, say hi to everybody. I took her to a park yesterday, and man, she went berserk because she actually saw deer. And she goes nuts when there are deer. We're out in a place right now where there may be some, but luckily we're not nearby because you'll hear her. She just freaks out. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to tap on the screen. I think I can like it too. Yeah, I can like the video. If you don't mind, if you could be so kind as to touch the screen for like maybe a half a second and invite some of your friends, that would be absolutely splendid. I'm going to do the same while we sort of all filter in here. If the dog doesn't yank me down the hill. Right, Ruby? Okay. Let me just do that for a second here. Okay, welcome everybody, by the way. Thanks for coming and spending a little time with me on this nice Thursday. Some people come in, it's the evening time where you are, I'm not sure. And also, if you don't mind, if you're from somewhere outside the U.S., can you please respond with your country? That's always helpful to know. That's always helpful to know. The time that you're seeing me on a live, please type in the number 1 so I can welcome you. I also don't want to repeat my background for anybody who may already know who the hell I am. So, I'm looking for some of the countries people might be from. Did I see the... Yeah, that's what I want to talk about today, Angela. The October 7th investigation done by Al Jazeera. And some of the more outrageous claims. I just dropped a video about it. It's a very sensitive subject, though. Somebody came into one of my lives, this guy named Menachem Bagel 3. And we were talking about this issue. And I was saying I couldn't deny anything, which is fair. But I couldn't corroborate anything, too, because the evidence hadn't been presented. And he came up on the panel. I always like to give everybody a chance. You know how it is. And he came up and he said, I hope you're anally raped for denying but I'm like, dude, come on, man, that's absurd. So this just goes to show you where some people's sensibilities are, unfortunately. So I'm looking to see if anybody's from outside the U.S. Thank you for sharing the live, Queen. I appreciate that so much. Yeah, if you could do the same. Netherlands, hey, welcome. Holland is beautiful. The farmers there are not quite as happy as they have been in the past. But neither of those in France either. You have to wonder what the real purpose is behind some of these new regulations. I've heard a lot about it. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Gigi, Coco, for sharing. I appreciate that so much. Tampa, Florida. Ybor City, baby. Tampa, St. Pete. It's a pretty area. I've been down there. We went in college. We took an RV and we went down to Daytona Beach, of course. That's where everybody goes. And then we went across to the other side towards Tampa. It was great. We had a great time. And as you might imagine, at that age, we were not necessarily sober the whole time. And that's putting it nicely. Darth Rose says, oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. I'm not a steady creator. The one that I am most impressed with is Midwestern Marks, Eddie Liger. The guy seems to put out like 7 videos a day. I don't know what he does, must not sleep. Yeah, I think that part of the world's nice. Although, Florida has its own issues with some other things, which are not ideal politically, but I think it's in certain times of the year it's great to go down there, like June, July, pretty brutal. But yeah, Eddie's very knowledgeable. He's just one of these people that has a big heart and is willing to put his time and effort into sharing what he knows and what he believes, which I think is great. Hey, what's up? Velas is here. If you don't know who Velas is a very confident and outspoken person who does very well in the financial markets. And he runs a group called the Millionaires Meta Forum, which is sort of a mentorship group as well as a live tracking of the markets where he helps people develop as new traders. He's helping me. And he also makes call outs He doesn't want anybody to follow his call-outs, but he makes them to tell people what he's doing because he's not a financial advisor. And anybody who does this is not supposed to tell people what to do. They're supposed to tell people what they're doing, and they can choose to do what they want. So I would say that if you haven't checked out Vayless, I think Vayless1, Vayless is his name on TikTok. He normally live streams, I think, on TikTok every market open around 9:30 a.m. So I invite those of you who are curious, just check it out. Now, if you're someone who hates foul language, you might have to cover your ears temporarily at times because Vayless likes to speak in ways that he prefers, and that's just him. And he's a very, but he's a very kind-hearted guy. I think if you get to know him, he's like a teddy bear dressed in sort of a bravado clothing, I would call Vayless. But he's got a really big heart. He wants to help people get better, so he's trying to help me, which I appreciate. So that's Vayless in a nutshell. And if I followed all the calls he suggested, I would have a lot more money than I have right now if I had the courage to do it. So, and thanks for sharing the live, Vayless. So yeah, that's just a little market stuff. That's what I'm doing now in my other time, is trying to learn how to trade, because it allows you the flexibility of traveling with a laptop or a computer. And as long as you have Wi-Fi and you know what you're doing, you can earn a basic living. So that's my goal with that. Don't want to get rich, don't want to be Michael Milken, or I don't even be Vayless. I just want to be Chip and have enough money to pay the bills. The dog's starting to freak out a little bit. No, I'm not trading cryptocurrencies. Cryptos for me have always been too volatile, and the exchanges are decentralized. So people can mess up with the spreads. If you don't know what a spread is, it's the difference between the price you pay to buy an asset versus the price that you can then sell it for if you immediately dump it. And the spreads are too wide and they're decentralized, so you don't get necessarily the best inside market pricing. Whereas on the regulated exchanges, you get centrality, which means that the inside price that you pay for buying it and selling are the same for everybody. And I think that's a much better way to trade if you're going to trade, because the big thing is, if you get caught on the wrong side of a trade, the spread adds up every single time. You're losing that. It's like paying the 10% to the bookmaker when you're betting sports, which is crazy. Somebody says, moot me. I don't know what that means. Anyway, so today I want to make a quick update for those of you who don't know. So a guy named, I learned this from a YouTuber named Owen Jones. He's somebody who I follow. I think he's a trustworthy guy. He seems reasonable to me. Tries to be, sensitive to people and not say things that are too inflammatory, unlike myself. I tend to let people have it when I believe one thing. But he talked about a report that was conducted by Al Jazeera. And what they discovered in the report, and I just did a video about this, was that there was absolutely, as I've thought, there's absolutely zero evidence to corroborate some of the most egregious allegations against what happened on October 7th. So if you listen to the public statements, both initially and ongoing, from the Israeli spokespeople, as well as a lot of people who support Israel, you will hear them say things like, how can you support a group that did sexual assault towards women, or made incisions into a woman's belly to take out the unborn child, and then stab, all those things. People being BUR'd alive, people being, horribly mistreated and tortured, all these other things that were talked about. There's just no evidence to support it. Now, in fairness, what I said in my video was, it doesn't make anything that happened on that day any better. I mean, if I was a civilian and somebody came into my little neighborhood and decided they were going to shoot at me or whatever they did, that's no better in my opinion. But it goes to show you, I think what the Israelis decided to do, and this is my guess, is that they knew, and they actually sought out public relations staff, a guy named Frank Luntz, who's a Republican strategist, who uses linguistics for a living. He teaches people how to say things in such a way to create persuasion. And they asked him, hey, what would make our case more plausible to the public for what we're going to be doing next in Gaza? And they said, you have to involve young people, like little kids, like the head thing we heard about, and sexual assault. Those are the two things that people get most angry about, is harm to little children and, of course, women who are kind of defenseless. So that's what they did. They made all these claims about the mass use of those activities. And now we're learning that most of that is just a bunch of hot air, or at least there's no evidence to support it, I should say. And in fairness, I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. I'm just a person, trying to make heads or tails. I'm nobody, and nobody has to give me anything. But I've had a lot of people who are on the other side of the issue who say they have direct evidence of it. I'm like, okay, send it. And so they have. They sent me emails, and it never includes anything substantive. It's always somebody talking about it, or everybody saying, everybody knows that happened. Well, that's not evidence. That's conjecture. So that's been the problem. Am you on a hiking trip? Yeah, I'm out with the dog. I'll just show you the quick scenery. There's the dog. And here's the scenery. It's beautiful out right now. So this is a secluded place I come with her periodically. There's not too many deer out here. Another place I take her has tons of deer, and she goes absolutely berserk. You can hear her whimpering, though. She wants to walk around more. Okay, dog, let's walk. So I wanted to share that with the audience. I've talked about this at length before, and I've really worked hard to try to find the evidence for that, because if these things did happen, it's fair to call them out for what they are. I think the challenge with this was said by, I've mentioned this a bunch, there's a guy named Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He was the former chief of staff to General Colin Powell during the Bush administration. And these are his words, not mine, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. But he was going to go on and talk about something to do with Israel, and he said, before I start, let me say this. These are his words. He said, you can't trust a single word that comes out of the mouth of an Israeli official ever, whether it's the IDF, whether it's anybody in their media, whether it's any government spokesperson. He says, they just lie. He said, the Israelis are inveterate liars. They lie. So those are his words. And so the observations that I've made over the years, and I don't want to condemn anybody for being a certain way, and it's not everybody, of course, but that's the same thing that I've sort of gleaned from the things that I've watched. Now, I can't say that everything somebody says is untrue, because I've not heard everything they've said. But the things that we've heard recently, Elon Levy and Mark Regev and these other Israeli spokespeople, they lie through their teeth constantly. And then they get challenged on it, and they kind of talk. Then they point to deflect. They talk, well, the Holocaust, well, the Jewish people, well, there's anti-Semitism. They start to run on this other lane. They're like, dude, what about the thing we were talking about? No, they can't discuss things directly. And this is the problem when you behave in a way that's indefensible. You have to create ways to obfuscate to the public what you're actually doing, because if you didn't, and they found out about it, like many are now, they would not be on your side. They wouldn't support what you're doing. And the Israelis have had a very, very smooth path for decades, using the U.S. media and other outlets to sort of sanitize the crimes that they commit against Palestinians. And there's no disputing this. You can try to justify it based on security if you want to, but those crimes have been mostly hidden from the eyes of most Americans. Now, when they invaded Lebanon in 1982, that was just too egregious and over the top. They were just basically mass murdering Lebanese civilians and occupying their country because they decided they were going to do it. And then the then sitting president, Ronald Reagan, called Menachem Begin, who was then the prime minister, that word escaped me, of Israel, and said, hey, cut it out. Cut it out. You got to stop, or you're going to be not going to be getting your money there, pal. And that doesn't happen lately. We know the Biden administration has been saying things publicly. There's sort of, I don't know if it's condemnation is the right word. They've been sort of alluding to some of the more egregious things Israel's been doing that are obviously worthy of criticism. But they haven't kind of helped put down the hammer. They haven't said, hey, if you continue doing this stuff, you're not going to get any money. You're not going to get any more arms. The U.S. continues to supply offensive weaponry. It's one thing to supply the Iron Dome that fires down these crude rockets that the H Group fires into Israel. Okay, fair enough. That's defensive. That's defending yourself. But flying above a very densely packed area and dropping 7 or 8 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on refugee camps, that's not defending yourself. That's mass murder. That's intentional murder of civilians, no matter how you want to slice it or dice it. There's no way to say that some militant group is holding 84 people in a building, women, children, innocent men, and they want them to die to make Israel look bad. What a ridiculous and absurd thing to say. So in regards to these things, that's why I have a hard time believing the claims that are made. It's not because I don't want to. It's because when you create a pattern, it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you stand on the edge of town and you yell wolf and all your people come running out to help, not have the wolf come take your herd of sheep, and you do it 4, 5, 6 times and you laugh every time, well, the 7th time you cry wolf, guess who's not coming out? And that's kind of the experience that I've had with listening to the Israeli commentary. And they're masters at it, though. They put out false stories. They hire people to sanitize the internet on Wikipedia. They hire journalists who go to work for companies. There's probably people right now in my community that are basically on the dole from Israel, and we don't even know it. And yet they're involved in somehow changing the editorial tone, or actually someone actually doing interviews, or you don't even know that there's such a huge amount of money being spent by the Israelis to these ends. And the reason they spend this money, and the reason why they have to spend that money and go through all these links, is because you can't defend the indefensible. They have to go on offense in terms of propaganda to overcome the defensiveness they'd have to do to try to explain themselves. And therein lies the problem. By the way, it's hard to It's hard to read all the comments in the light here. I apologize. Somebody says, why do I tell the bad versus good people? How do I tell? In other words, how do I discern or differentiate? Everyone has a range of good and bad. It's not like so simple. It's like everyone's bad or good. I try to go by the standard of just somebody honest. Are they kind? Are they decent? Do they treat other people well? Do they care about the suffering of others? Or are they indifferent, cold, callous, lying, conquesting, domineering, sociopaths? And if somebody fits the former, then I consider them to be, a decent human being. And by the way, nobody's perfect, right? So everybody on one side or the other of that continuum has some of each in us, right? We all have that in us. But those who choose to exhibit it and lean on it constantly, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of the hardcore Zionists, and I'm not saying that wanting a homeland is bad for people. I think that's absurd. But what I am saying is if you're willing to do anything and everything to harm another group of people to get what you want, which is what it appears to be that Israel does, including murdering people and moving them off their land because you just want it, or you look down on them and you have a superiority complex, I don't think that's good. And it wasn't good when our forefathers did it in the United States, North America, to the indigenous population. It's not good when European conquest happened in different places around the world, colonialism. And it's not good now in Palestine with the Israelis doing it. The difference is that I'm somebody who was born in 1967. I can't teleport time-wise back to 1810 and tell Andrew Jackson to cut it out. He was president in the late 18 teens, the guy on the $20 bill. But I can right now look at what's going on in current time frame, and I can talk about it. We can try to do what we can to muster support to hopefully put an end to the gruesome nature of this experiment, which has gone way beyond its initial purpose. I understand that people want a homeland. Good for you, have your homeland. But don't then conquer other territory, try to kick people out, murder them, starve them, cut off their entire lives from anything that makes their life meaningful, create massive unemployment, have snipers shooting at little kids, injuring them, pouring cement down their water wells, poisoning their crops, tearing up their olive branch. This is unnecessary. Spraying contaminated sewage water on people's homes just because you can, forcing them to weld their front doors shut because you don't want them, so to speak, walking down your street, a Jewish-only street. This is the kind of stuff that the Israelis do constantly, both in Gaza and the occupied territories. They say it's because of security. I'm not buying it. And I think most people who find out about this stuff, they don't buy it either. And that's the problem. And are there good people in Israel? Absolutely. And there are also good people who support Israel who just don't know any better. They don't know the things that are done in the name of Israel, and they're told a story, so they believe the story. Same way we get it in our country. So I don't blame anybody who doesn't know what they don't know. That's not fair. But if you have somebody who then learns about it but still doesn't care, that's a different animal. So what I try to do, and it seems sometimes it can seem condescending to say this, but if you say to somebody, hey, have you had a chance to check this particular piece of information out? And they go, no, and I'm not interested. Okay, just leave that person alone. They're not worthy of your interaction. They're just somebody who wants to be in an echo chamber. But what I try to do is to reach the people who are open-minded, which unfortunately isn't everybody, and share resources. And I give them the opportunity to do the same with me. It's like I did for the evidence. I asked people to put stuff up on Telegram or send me to websites or send me stuff on email, and I checked everything they sent me. And if something doesn't check out for whatever reason, I just let them know, hey, this is what I looked at. This is what I thought was worthy of more discussion, or this was not helpful to substantiate the point you're making. But unfortunately, I very rarely get that back in return. Most people want to believe what they believe. The way I look at things is I want to figure out what's really going on. And if it contradicts what I believe, so be it. I don't have any allegiance to what I believe. Why should I? The other thing is getting constantly criticized for taking sides. I think that's really unfair to say about this situation, because if the tables were turned and this was an Arab nation metering out this horrific mistreatment against displaced Jewish people, the Arab nation would be worthy of condemnation, even if the Jewish people had fought back periodically using disgusting tactics because they were so desperate and they had nothing else at their disposal. I wouldn't like it, but I would understand it. So therefore, I just have the same logic applied to people who are on the other end of it. It just happens that the roles are switched. But somehow, if you talk about someone who's Jewish or Zionist, you're now a raging anti-Semite and you hate all Jewish people. That to me is absolutely disgusting. It's an accusation that's baseless, and it's so often used now, it has no meaning. It's like calling everybody a racist because they wear a piece of black clothing or something like that. It's just idiotic. And if you're going to play the Zionist card, the we're the victim card, the Israeli victim card, every time something you hear doesn't fit in with your narrative, you got to work on your narrative there and work on your arguments, not your deflection. Your deflection. Now, I do have a picture on my phone, which I love dearly, and it's a picture of a can, like a spray can, and on it says Zionist bullshit spray. And when I was on Twitter, which I'm not anymore, but because Twitter's just too toxic, but when I was on Twitter, that's one of the ones I would put up. I also have a nice picture of Pinocchio, which I put up whenever I hear the Israeli talking points, which are usually absurd and worthy of, not even worthy of analysis. It's so silly sometimes. Let me give you one example of that. So we hear often that Israel has the most moral army in the world. We've heard Netanyahu say this publicly. Israel has the most moral army in the world. Nobody does what Israel does. Nobody sends warnings. Nobody puts out leaflets. Nobody does a little single tap on the roof before they... Yeah, Israel does that in a very small fraction of the time. Good for them for doing that when they do it. I applaud that. But it's not done frequently. So to make that claim that because it's done once in a long while, that it's done all the time is, again, absurd. And all that matters is, do you kill people indiscriminately or not? Whether you do some warnings here and there once in a long while, it doesn't affect the fact that you're murdering people. So, anyway, there's a lot of toxicity on Twitter. I'm certainly not the only person who's ever engaged in negativity on Twitter, whoever just said that. A lot of people, it brings out the negativity. That's why I jumped off. I was reviewing all my old messages. And I just realized, you know what, this is not the best of anybody, what we have to give, and I think we should try to be our best and not engage in silly back and forth. So social media to some extent is like that, you know, and it's got a lot of positives in terms of information flow, but it's got some negatives because I don't think it's the healthiest thing for our sense of well-being either. So I have mixed feelings about it. But anyway, like I said, we all have the ability within us to behave certain ways. We have good in us and we have the potential for bad. And we all know that from our own lives. We've had moments where we've all probably said or done something, maybe more than once, that we're not particularly proud of. And hopefully people in our lives will accept apologies and move on. Some don't, so be it. But just always got to try to be better. That's the human life experience. And as they say in the Bible, may you who's perfect cast the first stone. Or you who is without sin, I guess is how it goes. And anytime somebody's pointing a finger at you, there's three pointing back at them. Or if we're doing it, same thing. So anyway, I would love it if a guest would come up who disagrees on whatever I'm talking about. If you're somebody who supports Israel and you think that my point of view is uninformed or ill-informed, or you think I'm just flat out wrong, come up and talk about it. Share your point of view. If you're on the live last night, we gave a lot of time to somebody who disagreed vehemently with the points of view. We had a very civil conversation. I gave the person, as a host, I try to give people ample time to share their views and not denigrate them or talk, disrespectfully to them. And I wish that was the way that all the lives work, but it doesn't. But that is what it is. So, but he made some good points, actually. He made me think a lot about some of the precursors to the 1967 war. This is the great thing about having conversations with people and actually listening, is that in many cases, they're going to say some things that make you think. And you can't always have all the information in your head. Other people are just going to get things that you don't get. So while I don't agree with the justification for the preemptive war in 1967, I can understand the argument that someone would make to justify it. And I think the person last night helped reinforce that thought. So I still think that, unfortunately, the way that Zionism functions, there's just this thing about it. There's an arrogance, an indifference to suffering of others, this sort of selfish, self-centered, sort of self-serving way of doing things. After people who lived in a territory welcomed a lot of people who happen to be a part of the group you're from, and then you take advantage of that kindness and then you do what you do. I think that's unfortunately, that's not a good quality. When somebody opens the welcome door and then you steal their house. That's not too cool. Okay, we have somebody in the guest queue. It says Pretty Face 01, recent guest. Nice name to have, Pretty Face.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. So thanks for being here. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, so where do you think that comes from, that selfishness of not recognizing others' pain? Do you think it comes from the way we were raised or
Well,
our environment?
I don't think it's inherent to the people themselves. I don't think they're ethnically that way from birth. I think that the conditioning that people get in their homes, from their parents, their family, from their schools, from their community, their society, if it emphasizes those things and repeats them frequently, people tend to just believe that's what is because that's what they've been exposed to. So in America, for example, not to just criticize Israel, we're told from birth that we're the greatest country in the world, that America is this shining city on the hill that has the best democracy and the best values worldwide, that we spread truth and democracy and we try to stop people who are being cruel to others. That's the story. We do the Pledge of Allegiance. We wave the flag. We're supposed to be patriotic and support our country. We're taught to go to school for 12 years, then go to college if you go, and then get a job and then work dutifully for an employer, get your retirement, and then die. That's our sort of script.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can look at that script and shoot a lot of holes in it, right? You can say, well, what about the American empire? What about the CIA? What about all the interruptions in other governments, the overthrows, the coups, the militarism, the profiteering, and all the stuff that we know goes on? But most people, if they're not told about that stuff, are going to believe the narrative. And similarly in Israel, they're brought up believing that Israel is the salvation for Jewish people, and that you have to support Israel if you want to support the future of the Jewish people, because Tanakh means the future extermination or what happened in World War II. That's the narrative that you hear. So for somebody who comes out who happens to be Jewish, living in Israel or outside, for one to speak out against that takes a lot of courage, because that is what most people believe. And if you say those things publicly, you get shunned. I think what lies at the core, to answer your question, is there's a certain premise of sociopathy and supremacy that guides the belief systems that allows these types of behaviors to keep recurring for decades. Because it's not just what's happened with Netanyahu since he's been in power. It's been happening for the better part of 75 years. And I think it comes from that. And unfortunately, that's just like what the people in Germany did, even though it didn't take quite to that extent. But the mindset that produces that kind of behavior is very similar.
Yeah, my family's from West Africa, but I've been here for most of my life in America. And, being able to go to school, get your education, go to college, you have this confidence about you, but you can have that and still not be arrogant towards others, because other countries do not have the opportunities that we have here,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I agree
So
100%.
you can see
So
how
the
people,
other thing is, when you have power or capability that others don't, it says a lot about you with how you use them vis-a-vis others who don't. So if you look at what Israel's chosen to do, it's had the backup of the largest military in the world and the richest country in history since World War II, the United States. And what have they chosen to do? Have they chosen to be fair-minded and equitable and peaceful? Or have they been, violent and repressive because they believe that somebody who's getting the short end of the stick should never push back, and that there's got to be another way for them to act? But then you make it impossible for them to act peacefully, and then you condemn them when they act violently. It's a no-win situation to be in. So I believe that Israel could serve itself a lot better if its leaders didn't behave the way they're behaving, especially in response to what happened on 10/7. I think they're figuratively shooting themselves in the foot.
yeah, it's a lot. I'm just now really learning about Israel and Palestine and the history of it. I'm not really knowledgeable about it.
Well, may I share some resources that might help you get up to speed quickly?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, there's a great journalist online on YouTube, and I give you this first because it's the quickest way to get information. Her name is Abby Martin,
Okay.
and her YouTube channel is called The Empire Files. And she has done work on so many great things, but she especially embraces this issue because she learned about it like I did when she was younger and just advocates for it. But she created a documentary called Gaza Fights for Freedom, which is a great watch. It's a little longer, but if you want to watch a quick intro, she has a video called Palestine 101, which is a really quick overview, sort of, executive summary of what this whole thing's about from the beginning to present. So I like her work. If you want to read something, there's an excellent book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. But I warn you,
I'm gonna write that down.
yeah, please do, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And I will say this, it's going to disturb you, because what you think you may have known, just like I thought I knew what I knew, it's going to shatter that, and it's going to really make you sad to learn the totality of what's been done to Palestinians over the decades. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into these sources and read it because I do want to get up to speed. I haven't,
Yeah, I have one more to share with you because this is personal. I'm assuming you're female. So a young Jewish woman went to live with a Palestinian family in Ramallah to try to learn more about what life is really like in the occupied territories. Because friends were telling her that all this stuff is basically going on that we've been talking about, and she was like, no, you're basically propagandized by these crazy Palestinian terrorists. And she's like, well, go ahead, go check it out for yourself. So she traveled to the occupied territories as a young Jewish Zionist, and what she learned shocked her, just like we talked about for reading the book. But when you live the experience with other people who are enduring oppression, it really registers. So she came back and she just spoke her truth. And that takes a lot of guts, like we mentioned earlier, because her whole family supports Israel and identifies their whole life identity with being a Jewish person who supports Israel. So for her to come back and speak out publicly was a big deal. Her name is Anna Baltzer, and you can look it up this exact way on YouTube. It's about a 45-minute video. So if you look up Anna Baltzer, Life in Occupied Palestine, just look that up. And if you watch that video, it'll affect you deeply. You'll be like, oh my gosh, how can this be? How did I not know this?
Well, thank
Interesting
you
stuff.
so much.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know,
Information.
I like your name. Please come back after you've dug into any of this and share what you've learned or what you feel about it. I'd love to have you come back.
Okay, I will. You have a great day.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate
Okay,
that.
bye-bye.
Yeah, that's the idea, to share information, because I can tell somebody what's up till I'm blue in the face, but they have to kind of experience their path of learning it in their way. And then it really sinks in, especially when you see somebody else who's a young woman trying to learn, about life, and she goes to a place and her whole worldview gets shaken at the core. That's seeing someone else tell a story about an experience is really what moves us, because that's how we learn everything. That's how our whole history was formed before we had writing. It was all, verbal stories. So I think we identify with that at a much greater level. So yeah, I'm glad that person came on. Hopefully they'll have a chance to engage with some of those things. And, it's the first step of anything is awareness. And that's the challenge, given the fact that the large portion of the media apparatus is limited in what it shows people. And thank goodness for social media, although we see it's kind of under assault. Hopefully, we have access to a free and unfettered social media landscape, although we already know from just what's happened so far, people like me and others who are, either shadow banned or get their accounts taken down. Eddie from Midwestern Marks, he's had his account banned 8 times. One time with 800,000 followers. And his other accounts that were geared towards wrestling and mixed martial arts, because he got the other ones taken down for political stuff, they took those down too. So he has been the victim directly of censorship. And, I can't say for sure, but it seems like those who proactively try to screen things, who spend all that money we talked about, target people like Eddie and apps like TikTok to try to limit the reach of certain information they find unflattering and that counteract the narrative that they like to put out. So groups like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt and company. Okay, Asme is coming up to talk. Asme is a regular person in the audience. I appreciate her. How you doing, Asme?
Hi Chip, how are you?
I'm hanging in. How about you?
I'm good, thank you. It's 11 p.m. here. I just wanted to ask you a question about Rafah, which is Rafah.
Yeah.
And do you think the IUF will conduct a large invasion into Rafah, or do you think they will be under the pressure of the international community and not do it? And what do you think what do you think the consequences of attacking Rafah will be for Israel, and will the United States continue supporting Israel even though it's losing its support from many Western countries? So this is my question. And Chip, again, thank you so much for these lives. I know you only do lives on Wednesday, I think, on Saturday.
Usually,
I don't know,
I do.
but thank you so much.
Okay, Esme, thanks for the questions. I'll try to remember all of them.
Thank you.
You can stay up if you want to catch me if I forget. Okay, so
Okay,
do I think that Israel will conduct military operations in Rafah? They already are. So they've been doing bombing campaigns and raids So that's from what Netanyahu is saying, and we have no reason to not believe what he says. They intend to prosecute the war the way they want to do it, regardless of any external pressure. Which again, I said about shooting oneself in the foot figuratively. I believe that's a great example of that. But the arrogance and indifference to the suffering of others is what drives that behavior. Now, I understand if you're angry about what happened on 10/7 and you want to maintain long-term security, those aren't outrageous objectives or things to shoot for. But to conduct a conflict where you force 1 million or 2 million people to a small, very densely populated area of what was already a very densely populated territory in general, and then try to squeeze them out or somehow just then unalive them if they don't move, is reprehensible and is indicative of the very indifference that I mentioned. So I do believe they're going to do it to some extent. I can't predict exactly what they're going to do. But I think that the attitude among the leaders in Israel is everyone else can go to hell. We're going to do this our way. We're the mighty Israel in the territory. They harmed us, therefore they deserve whatever comes their way. I think that's the attitude among the decision makers. And unfortunately, many in the society who support, and in fact, in some cases, want more to be done than has been done so far, if you can believe that. As far as the reaction that's going to happen, if that does take place, I think it'll be outrage like there is now. It will be added into the case brought by the ICJ in terms of the findings as they put together the long-term investigation. But the unfortunate thing is that the reach of these institutions is such that it doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms. So long as the U.S. remains the backstop for Israel, financially, militarily, and politically, there won't be, at least as far as I can see at this moment, any consequences or sort of enforcement of the various findings. And it's going to take some time anyway. Now, the U.S. is claiming it's building this pier to deliver aid via sea on the coast of Gaza. First of all, it's going to take between 4 and 6 weeks to build anything usable. There are people right now in the north and elsewhere that are starving. When there are various aids delivered, they get attacked by the Israeli military. They either get hit by helicopter, they get hit by snipers, they get fired on by tanks or other vehicles. This is reprehensible. To forcibly starve a population, collective punishment. They've been doing it from the beginning, but the extent to which it's affecting the population now, especially young people, there have been many, many infants who have died because they just don't have mother's milk. They don't have access to any formula. Or they don't have the electricity if they're prematurely born to get the warmth they need to survive. If this was happening to Israel, if there was an Arab nation strangling the availability of food, fuel, electricity, and medical supplies from Jewish people, they would cry Holocaust. And yet somehow when they do it to a population of 2.3 million people, from which maybe 15, 20,000 took part in the operation on 10/7, probably less, that's insane. That's a minuscule fraction of the population who did not participate and probably didn't even support what took place in terms of the severity against civilians and things like that. To the extent they broke free and they took on military posts and gathered intel and unalived soldiers and police, as bad as that can be, that is conflict. And the Israelis have maintained a warlike footing. Anybody who says, why did 10/7 happen? Why did they attack us? Well, when you maintain a blockade, you being Israel, and you force someone to deal with the consequences of a blockade, which involves the air, land, and sea, when you as a country control everything that happens in that territory, including what gets in, what gets out, who moves, who doesn't. You control the Navy so they can only fish at certain times. Sometimes you attack their ships and unalive people, you shoot people, you come in periodically and what you call mow the lawn, where you bomb and kill 500, 1,200, 1,500 people several times over the course of 5 years, because you can. When the rockets that are being flown at you from these crude constructions rarely, if ever, even hit the ground because they're knocked down by this defensive system. And granted, if I were Israeli, I would not want to live under the threat of these rockets. I'm not going to try to take a side that's not fair. But the Iron Dome system is very effective, and it's paid for by the United States. You and I pay $36,000 every time a round is fired in the sky. That's what you and I pay. That goes on our credit card. So, having said all this, the point is, in terms of proportionality plays a big part of conflict. And the Ben Shapiros of the world argue that the best thing you should do is no proportionality when it comes to what he calls abject terrorism. Now, I don't know how you can categorize the H group as a terror group. I think that they're a militant group from an occupied people who, in this particular case, used some tactics that were worthy of being condemned for war crimes against civilians. I think that's fair to point that out. But you have to differentiate between the military engagement, the civilian engagement, and anybody who perpetrated atrocities against civilians should be held accountable, just like on the Israeli side. That's fair. And there was an interview, I don't know if you saw it, it was Candace Owens, and there was a rabbi she was speaking with, not Rabbi Shmuley, but another rabbi. His name doesn't come to mind. But he was angry at Candace because she was making an equivalence between the children and the adults that were killed on 10/7 with the children that are being killed in Gaza. And he thought the two are not even available in the same sentence. But death is death. If you are a civilian and you're innocent, you weren't involved in any of the conflict, and you get killed by someone flying a plane, by someone shooting a tank, by somebody firing a rifle, or somebody, coming at you with an RPG, it doesn't matter. You're being killed intentionally by another. And that's worthy of condemnation for each side. And this whole idea about human shields is bullshit. So I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict the future, and I hate making predictions because I'm never right. But I do know this: Israel's reputation is forever damaged. That is beyond question. And just like South Africa could not defend the indefensible, nor will Israel be able to defend its actions now and in the future as it continues to perpetrate these crimes against other people. So it's a mouthful. The fact that there's no accountability hurts deeply to those of us who care about the issue and also those who endure it. Just imagine having 25 or 30 members of your family snuffed out, and the people who did it aren't going to be held accountable. They've been dealing with this for decades, where there's no political solution in sight. They dare to fight back, and when they do, they get crushed. And the one thing I admire most about Palestinian people, and anyone for this matter who endures this, is they take it and they look at a longer term objective as this is the necessary suffering that one has to go through and experience towards the greater good in the long run. That's an amazingly resilient way to look at the world. And there are some people who have lost 25, 30, 40, 50 family members in this conflict. And, that's just unthinkable. I mean, imagine in your world right now, if 3/4 of your entire lineage are just gone. Can you imagine that?
I can't. I think the Palestinians are one of the strongest, if not the strongest people on earth. I mean, they have a very strong faith, and I don't know. I don't know how you can lose up to 70 family members and still want to defend your land and everything. And speaking of human shields, the excuse or the argument that the US and Israel always use is the age group is basically I'm looking for words. I'm sorry. I'm not, English is not my first language. It's hiding. The age group is hiding behind the babies, the families. And Netanyahu was saying that he needs to invade Rafah because in Rafah there are the last two age group battalions. I don't know if it's true. How they can know there are two battalions of age group, because as far as I know, they said that they destroyed the age group in the north of Gaza, yet they are still engaged in fights, in combat with the age group in the north of Gaza. So do you think the age group is in Rafah right now? I mean, considering that there are around 1.4 million people there. So I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't believe anything that the Israelis says, not a word from their mouth.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the age group is there in Rafah, like preparing the invasion to combat the IUF. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Chip?
My best guess, of course, I have no way of knowing for sure, but my best guess, I follow people like Scott Ritter, Colonel. I follow people like Douglas McGregor, Scott Ritter, and others, Jeffrey Sachs. I do not believe for a second, just like we got false information from our government about the Ukraine war, where way more Ukrainian soldiers had died than Russian soldiers, but we're still hearing accounts that are contrary to that. I don't believe any figures from the IDF or from the Israeli government for a lot of reasons. I do believe it's more likely that the tunnel system, which is an amazingly engineered feat, it's crazy how elaborate these tunnels are, that most likely there are fighters distributed all across the Gaza Strip underneath the ground. And they can move and they can come up and they can do what they want to do. Then they can close off that part of the tunnel, which they've planned to do for decades. And that's how they operate. Now, you can say that's cowardly if you're from the Israeli side. Like, well, how dare these guys not fight fair? This is absurd. Come up and fight, get rid of the hostages, turn yourself in, all these things we hear. Well, they don't have the same military capability and the armaments and the soldiers that the Israelis have because of all the other advantages that back up Israel, the money from the U.S. and all the stuff we've talked about. So they have to fight unconventionally. They call that terrorism. That's not terrorism. It's guerrilla warfare, and it's urban warfare. It's very difficult to fight an enemy who knows the terrain, who has access to underground tunnels, and can pop up and cause mayhem at a moment's notice, and you don't even know where they're coming from. That's very hard to do. So someone's passing by. Hi.
Do you ride? Do you ride? Is that how you got the foxhound?
No. None of that. None of that. Someone was asking me if I ride horses and a fox hunts.
You guys out there when I was like,
No. So I don't know what to say, but I don't believe the number. I don't think there's only 2 battalions or whatever those numbers are. I don't know how many soldiers that is. When I was in the Army, a battalion was like, I don't know, maybe like 175 to 200 soldiers. I think there are a lot more than that left. My guess is there's probably at least 7,000 to 10,000 fighters left. And even if you unalive all the fighters, let's just say that Israel snapped its fingers right now and they're gone, which that won't happen. You can't extinguish the idea of resisting because you put up a situation where someone does not see a potential future. And when people are facing those types of situations, just like Jewish people who were in the Warsaw ghettos during World War II, when the Third Reich was mistreating Jews so horribly, they decided to fight back rather than just accept their fate. So if you don't fault the Jewish people in the ghettos in World War II, which I commend them for fighting back, then you can't fault the H group for fighting back under their oppressive circumstances. And everything's not the same in history. It's a little different in terms of the totality. But the idea, the feeling one has being under oppression and facing imminent, a bleak future at best, the natural human reaction is to fight back. So I don't know how you can. What I would think, just to finish the thought, Esme, and then I'd like to hear your point of view. I believe it's going to be much harder for the Israelis. I think they will attack Rafah. I think they will unalive, probably through starvation and other sickness. Another 20,000 Palestinians will be killed just from that. Probably another 15 or 20 from the combat. Israel claim it's human shields, but it's going to be death and destruction. So when it's all said and done, my guess is between 90 and 120,000 Palestinians will die. Probably 500,000 will be injured. And Israel doesn't care.
I honestly don't even want to think about it because, as you said, I think there will be a lot of destruction, death, bodies decomposing on the streets. Like basically, you can walk the street and see skeletons everywhere. I mean, it's horrible. And if Israel claims that the H group members are hiding in the tunnels, they are cowards because they can't fight man to man. As you said, they don't have the same military capabilities. They don't have tanks. They don't have. I think they have some snipers, but not as much as the IUF. But if Israel thinks that the H group is hiding in the tunnels, then why are they targeting buildings with families, with the elderly, with kids? Why are targeting hospitals? I know they say that they have tunnels under the hospital. Then why are they targeting the hospitals and not the tunnels? I mean, I don't understand anything about what they say. I don't believe them. They are liars. And I can't wait for the day they will lose support from the United States, even though I think that day is very, very far. I mean, the US is doing everything to support Israel, and I don't think they can impose sanctions or anything like that, because
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's Israel first, not America first. So that's why I think.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your point of view. So to answer your question, I think the reason why Israel does what it does, not only after 10/7 but before, is because they can. They do what they can as far as imprisoning people for either no reason or petty reasons for lengthy prison sentences, mistreat them horribly in prison. You know, if somebody does watch that, if Pretty Face watches the Life in Occupied Palestine documentary, or watches a story of during the Nakba called Tantura, one of the massacres in a village where Israeli soldiers, former soldiers in their elderly years, are recounting what they did. It's disgusting. And it all stems from that attitude I talked about. So what we're seeing currently is just an extension of that. And of course, unfortunately, the hardest right-wingers are in charge right now, who embody the worst of that Zionist element. And therefore, they're completely sociopathic and indifferent to the suffering of others. And therefore, if they feel that another group has to leave or go, and this is what I say, I was almost yelled at for not agreeing with somebody. I don't believe the Israeli government wants to kill every Palestinian. I don't believe that. And I don't believe Israeli society wants that for the most part. I do believe that they act with what I call callous indifference to the suffering and death of Palestinians. Meaning that as long as they accomplish the mission of destroying the physical infrastructure of Gaza and try to get rid of the H group, doesn't matter how or when people get hurt or whatever happens. Whatever gets damaged, whoever might die, they don't give a shit. They just don't care. They say they do. They say they go out of their way to do it, but their actions speak otherwise. And that's the big thing on social media, is that TikTok has opened people's eyes to that reality, that what the Israelis say versus what they do couldn't be further apart. I always like to say what Israel says and what Israel does, the distance is from the Milky Way to the Andromeda Galaxy, like 80 million light years or some shit like that. They just don't tell the truth because they indiscriminately bomb and murder people, and not because they don't have any, there's no repercussions. They act with total impunity, and they have the ability to do it, so they just do it. That's what happens. And I know most people who support Israel would say that's not true, that you're lying through your teeth. But the evidence, and I have probably 100 videos and probably more pictures on my phone that show a cameraman, a journalist, standing on top of a building in Gaza, probably in Khan Yunis or in the north when this all got started. And they just have the camera set up, and they're just filming a part of town. And what happens? An Israeli warplane comes by and fires a guided missile at the base of a building and just knocks it over. 15, 20 stories, 80 to 100 people gone, buried under the rubble, dead. No notice, no leaflets, none of that Sukkot stuff. There's no H group around, nobody being held as human shields, no stashing weapons, just mass murder. And that is the vast majority. The exceptions are when they once in a while will leaflet a territory or a hospital and says, go this way, go this way. Then, as people are going that way, just for kicks and giggles, they bomb them on the way there because they can. I got videos of that, unfortunately. So it's pretty despicable. That's the word I like. The people who do these things are morally depraved. And like I said, they have a callous indifference. They have a supremacy complex. They think that Jewish life is more important than any other kind of life, but especially Arab life, and especially Palestinian life. They just don't care. And I'm not saying that all the citizens feel that way. I'm talking about the leadership and the governing and the military and those who make these decisions, and those who carry them out. Because if you're a pilot and you're told to go drop this bomb there, you can't say later, well, I was just following orders. No, you're dropping bombs on civilians. You know what you're doing. And this has nothing to do with war being complicated. I've been in a war zone. We encountered thousands of Iraqis who weren't dead, who surrendered, and our army did not kill them. We didn't bomb them. We didn't shoot them. We didn't blow them up. We didn't hit them with snipers. We collected them up as POWs. We treated them with respect and dignity, as a moral army would do, which Israel doesn't do. And we processed them in a way that was humane. We took care of them. We didn't mistreat them. Now, that didn't always happen. In the Abu Ghraib prison, we saw examples of that not happening. We have people that are down in Guantanamo Bay. That's an example of the U.S. not following its best measures. But I can only speak to my unit and what we did in combat. And we followed the rules to a T. That's not what Israel does. Israel would have, at best, stripped them naked, stuck them in the cold, blindfolded them, put their hands behind their back, and immiserated and just humiliate them. Because that's what Israel does. But that's not what we did. And so I can only speak to that. But the idea of going in and just killing people because they just happen to be somebody that we're not disgusts me. And what Israel does on the regular, not every unit, not every soldier, but enough that it's noteworthy and it's pervasive. I mean, here's a great example of the depravity. This happened in the West Bank, not in Gaza. But there's a very well-known journalist named Shireen Abu Akleh who was shot in the neck and she died. It was done by an IDF soldier. They initially claimed it was done by crossfire. Then it turned out they said it was by accident. And then it turned out we know for sure, pretty sure, that it was just done on purpose. So she died. That was horrible. She was identified clearly as a journalist. It's what Israel does. They murder people, okay? When they decide they want to kill somebody, they do, and they get away with it. They do an internal investigation by the IDF. They say there's no evidence to support that it was not accidental, that kind of bullshit. And that's it, it's done. But we all know what's going on. Now, 2 days later, when her funeral was held, guess what happened? And this happens all the time in the West Bank. Israeli police came in and they beat the crap out of all the attendees of her funeral, including the pallbearers who were carrying her casket, such that they dropped the casket.
Yes, I saw the video.
And by the way, Israel does this all the time. And in addition, if people are leaving the funeral, instead of allowing them to take the road that's the shortest path home, they close the roads down and they make somebody go like 4 hours the other way through all these checkpoints. Now, why do they do that? Does that help their security? Nope. They just, and I hate to use this word, they just want to fuck with these people to make their life miserable as much as they possibly can, because they have total disdain and they treat them like lesser. It's truly an apartheid regimen in the West Bank. Different streets, different roads. I have a video on my feed. It got taken down, but it shows an Israeli settler driving on a Palestinian road and reaches for a hand, the thing that, you pull the thing and it goes boom, boom. And just a Palestinian vendor was in his truck just driving down the road, and he just directs one of those things towards his vehicle. Luckily it didn't get him. It hit the side of his vehicle a little behind the window, and he shows it when he pulls over. He says, this is where but settlers get away with that stuff. They can just do what they want with impunity. They can shoot Palestinians, they can beat them up. They have the cover of the police and the military to do it. Happens all the time. Most Israelis would never believe this happens. Oh, that's not true. That doesn't happen. You're lying. That's propaganda. Whatever. No, it's not. This is how the Zionist mentality plays itself out in the real world, and it's unfortunate. I wish it weren't the case. I wish Palestinians, everybody who lives in the West Bank knows this. I spoke with somebody in the West Bank. In order for them to go to work, they had to go through a checkpoint. At the checkpoint, they grab their phones. They go through everything from start to finish. If you even like a TikTok video like one of the ones I make, they seize your phone and arrest you. This is what I'm not lying, Dragnos. I'm not lying at all. I'll put it this way. If you're willing to stake your life against my life to prove one's right and one's wrong, I'll make that bet with you. I have video proving what I'm talking about. Everything I say is always backed up by evidence. I don't make broad, sweeping claims for no reason. Why would I make that stuff up? So if you're willing to put your life up, or maybe 50 grand, against what I'm saying, you really think I'm lying? Let's put it up. Let's get a lawyer and let's do it. Okay? And I'm guaranteeing you, Dagonos, that your shit talking is going to stop pretty quick. Because when it comes time to put up or shut up, you're going to shut up. Because you're not going to put up. You're not going to risk your life or your money over a claim that I know to be true and you have no clue what you're talking about. Okay? And I wish it weren't the case. I would love to say polite things about Israel. I would love to say, man, I really am impressed by what the Israelis are doing. This is really a good deed. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm still looking for it. And I always like to say, for the Israelis who want to be commended for their behavior, give the public something to work with. Something to work with, and we will sing your praises from the heavens. But as long as you make the purposeful choice to immiserate another people and to subject them to horrific mistreatment on the regular for decades, you're going to get criticized by people who have any conscience. And I'll make it easier for you, Dagonos. Why don't we hire a lawyer and a police place? I'll pay for the polygraph. I'll bring my evidence. I'll speak my truth. And if I fail the polygraph and the evidence is the way up, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for your flight and everything. We'll videotape it and put it online. And if I'm right, you pay for the polygraph. and you admit that what I'm telling you is truthful. I'm willing to do it that way. I'll prepay all your stuff. How about that? So do you think I'm lying still if I'm willing to do all those things? Right? So Dagnos, you can say all you want, but the proof is in the pudding, and I got the pudding. So come on over. Let's do it. Let's set it up. You can email me at chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. I'll get a lawyer involved. He'll mediate everything. We'll get the paperwork done, and we'll do it. Come on. Come on. Come on, Rudy. Come on. Hop up. Yeah. So it's time for the Zionist bullshit to come to an end. Okay? If you don't want these things to be revealed, don't do them. And a lot of times, unfortunately, people who believe in the stories that Israel tells, they don't know about these things. They just don't know. And a lot of them aren't even willing to find out. In fact, if I was to challenge Dagnos to save his time and money and not be embarrassed publicly, just to do a little research ahead of time by doing some reading or watching some videos to better understand how this really works, he may or may not, he probably won't look at it. He probably will just assume, he'll dismiss it as being abjectly false, outright, rather than looking at it and trying to discern what the truth is or not, which is what all well-minded, well-intentioned human beings should do. And if there's proof about things that I'm not clear on, that Dagnos can bring to me, I will in good faith review it and of course admit it if I'm wrong or if the evidence proves otherwise. I'm happy to do that. It doesn't matter to me. If you're married to your point of view, then whatever somebody challenges your point of view, you take it personally, you get defensive. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't give a shit. Why should I? So, if I didn't know these things to be true, Dagnos, I wouldn't be speaking that way. And I wish they weren't true. It would be great if Palestinians were treated like human beings by the Israelis in the occupied territories in Gaza. I'll give you some resources. You're probably going to ignore it, but just in case you want to do it, it's better to say I shared it with you ahead of time so you don't make yourself look silly in public. There's a great documentary done by a young Jewish American who was raised in a Zionist household, who was challenged by her friends, who some of the same things I'm sharing with you, Dagnos, to go over to see for herself what's really going on. So she did. She went into the occupied territory. She went to stay with a family in Ramallah. And so she saw with her own two eyes what goes on with the things that I'm describing. And what I've described is just a little pebble among a complete, ocean of sand that the Israelis choose to do to Palestinians. Now, I'm not saying that pushback from Palestinians never happens. I know there are people that try to attack IDF soldiers. I know people try to hurt settlers. I know I'm not naive to those things. And I don't like it when people try to hurt each other. I don't like violence. But I understand it under the circumstances these people find themselves. I can't condemn them for wanting to do anything they can to try to get out from under this horrible mistreatment and their long-term plight. But if you look at the following, it's called Life in Occupied Palestine, and her name is Anna Baltzer. And if you think she's a paid propagandist, she's paid by the people in Qatar, make up your own mind, see if she's genuine. She's been talking about this stuff for decades. You can look up son of Israeli general Miko Peled. This is somebody who grew up in a very Zionist, very pro-Israel household. His father was a general in the IDF, for God's sakes. And when he learned what the Israeli military and police were doing to Palestinians, because he's a person of conscience and he's a courageous man, he acknowledged it, he spoke up about it, and he continues to speak out against it, as any decent person should. And again, before you start calling me anti-Semitic and that I hate Jewish people and I love brown people who happen to carry whatever and hurt people, all that bullshit, no, we're not going there. If the circumstances were flipped 180 degrees and the Jewish people were displaced and scattered the way that the Palestinian people were in 1947, 48, and they had to go off and try to get their lives back together, and they've been horribly mistreated by a set of Arab occupiers, then I would be equally critical of the Arab government exhibiting the same behavior that the Israeli government and military exhibit. Because it's not about who the players are, it's about the actions and the power dynamics. So you can't call that anti-Semitic. What am I, anti-Arab? Or anti-Palestinian in that case? Do I hate all brown people or hate all Palestinians or all Arabs because I'm criticizing the government and military of a regime that's forcing an ideology on others to its own gain where others have to suffer for it. Right? So again, if Israel, you know what Israel can do? They talk about H group. They want H group to surrender and turn over the hostages and everything's going to be fine, right? That's what they say. That's what they say. It's asking me to verify the live. I don't know what this is all about. It's going to end in 50 seconds, it says. Here's a puzzle piece. There we go. Okay, now it verified. I guess you don't touch the screen long enough if it does that. So the point is, if Israel would do the same, if it would get out of the occupied territories, get the blockade around Gaza relinquished, have an international peacekeeping force, abandon the illegal settlements that it's been carving out of a Palestinian land, taking even more and more of land that has nothing to do with Israel, and allow the people to have a chance to be peaceful. The reason why they're not acting peacefully is not because they're not a peaceful people. It's because they are dealing with circumstances that makes anybody unable to remain peaceful. That's the part the Israelis don't understand. And if you never give somebody the opportunity to behave peacefully, you can't keep your thumb or your boot on someone's neck and then say behave. It doesn't work like that. Because if somebody did it to you, as they did in the Warsaw Ghetto, well, how dare you attack German soldiers? What's wrong with you? What are you, a terrorist? No, you're making immiserated by another people. They're controlling your lives. They're doing horrific things to your people, and you're trying to fight back with what you can. So how can you blame them? If you're okay and supportive, as I am, of the people who are being oppressed in Germany or in Poland by the German regime, and they tried to fight back with what they could, even though it was crushed. I commend those people. As I commend, I don't enjoy violence, but I also understand the context within which the Palestinian people try to push back. And there's a political divide. I would argue that the government in the West Bank is complicit in dealing with Israel, and as are some of the other leaders in the region who are willing to take money and sort of get along, go along over really vying for their people, which is disgusting. And I think Abbas has like a 0.0% approval rating among his own people. But the fact that there was a political divide, it was actually fostered and encouraged by Netanyahu and company. But the fact that there was a political divide, and it was violent, I'm not for that either. I don't like how H Group deals with some of the things within the territory of Gaza, but it's not me to decide that. And therefore, there's a difference in how to deal with their circumstances. But the idea that, quote unquote, we gave them Gaza, which you hear this all the time because the Israelis chose to withdraw and dismantle their illegal settlements in Gaza, right? It was not legally occupying that land. It was illegally occupying that land. They didn't give back anything. If I take your car and I come back 12 years later and I drop your car off and go, hey, I'm giving you back your car. What? You stole my car. You're not giving back shit. You're returning stolen property. So after that stolen land was returned and the Israeli civilians and settlers were removed forcibly because they didn't want to go, the resistance group still had something to resist because there were other people among their people, even though there was a political divide, that they care about. It's a common struggle. So the fact that people left Gaza and they quote, all we got was rockets. That's what you hear from people on the other side. Why did they fire rockets? Because there was still something to resist, an occupation. If Israel had pulled out of Gaza and had dismantled the settlements in the West Bank and pulled back into its territory, and then rockets were fired, I agree with you 100%, 110%, because you gave people a chance to have autonomy and they screwed it up. Fair enough. But that's not what Israel did. It maintained a brutal and crushing occupation with police and military in a very apartheid type system. If Israel claims it owns the land, which it claims it does, then the government and the society has to encompass everyone who lives in the land. But it doesn't. You got to have it one way. Either you're occupying it illegally and you marginalize the people because you can, or it's your territory and everyone has rights. But you're having it both ways because you want to take more territory, which Israel's been doing very clearly for a long time. Can't debate that. That's been happening. More and more settlements are even being built right now. There's Jared Kushner, that douchebag, excuse my language, son-in-law of President Trump, who's a very, very evil guy. Trust me, I know people who live in the properties where he has the landlord rights. He's a complete scumbag. And he said something, again, more scummy, like he always does. He goes, there's plenty of potentially very valuable beachfront property that the people should go, meaning the Palestinians should go. Are you kidding me? This rich, arrogant scumbag has the nerve to say dismissively that a 2.1 million people should just go to make room for his beachfront property development. Listen, it's not about Jewish or not. God, I'm so tired of this bullshit. I'm saying this because Jared Kushner has no morals. He's another sociopathic, disgusting human being that has no concern for anybody but himself and his money. He could be from any background. He's a douchebag. Excuse my language, but that's the right term for the guy. He's a complete jerk. And the reason why I just despise the guy is not just because of what he said today or recently. That's disgusting. But what he's done is he's left people in terrible situations, not repairing their properties, not removing lead paint, not taking care of places. People have a water heater that breaks. They just let it stay that way. They don't have any water forever. He's just a scumbag. He's a slum lord. And he makes his money because he doesn't do his job properly. That's where most of his profits come from, by not keeping the lease. People pay their rent. He doesn't take care of the properties. So do some research if you don't know what's going on. So anyway, okay. So we have Ant-Man who wants to come in. I just want, anytime a guest comes up, I'm happy to have anybody talk about the subject at hand. I just don't want people in the comments or people on the panel being attacked personally. That's all I ask. You can share whatever you want about the situation, about the issues at hand. Happy to hear your point of view. So welcome to Ant-Man, if he's able to come through. I want to hear what Ant-Man has to share.
Hey, I'm new to this. What you call? I live in the Pacific Islands.
Okay.
I've been raised to know, like, I'm Christian. So the question is this: Isn't Israel, doesn't it own the land that the Palestinians are living in? Isn't that
No,
Israel's
no,
role?
not at all.
Throughout history, it doesn't say that?
No, does not.
Okay.
There
So what?
are some who claim, based on their interpretation of the biblical, from the history of time, that they think that the land is rightfully theirs. That's an argument that gets made, but it's not. There's no determination that says it is or it isn't. They just make the claim. Do you live in a house?
Yeah.
So if I made the claim that wherever you live in the islands was my island because my ancestors 3,700 years ago had people that might have lived there before they were moved off by the next person, and I came to your house today and said, hey, you got to leave right now, or I'm going to use force to make you leave, or maybe not even let you survive the process, what would you think about that?
I'll tell them to give me proof that this is your house.
Exactly. And they say, well, I'll tell you what, I have this book that somebody wrote 3,000 years ago that says it's mine. Here's the book. Take a look. See, this is what it says. You got to go. What would you say to that?
I would have them give me the genealogy that reaches their ancestors that claim that they lived on that land.
Well, let's take it a step further. I'll tell you what I would do. I would tell the person to take their book and put it where sun doesn't shine and get the hell off my property. And I believe you would too under the same circumstances. You wouldn't even entertain somebody with such delusion. And yet that's the story that gets told for a land without a people, for a people without a land. And that there's some historical claim based on the kingdom of David and Zechariah and all this other stuff. And every situation goes through turns and changes. Why not go back 4,000 years ago? And who lived on the land 4,000 years ago? And who dominated the land then? What about 5,000 years ago? What about 110 years ago? You can't just cherry pick a point in time and say because that was going on then, it has to be so now. Right? Do you agree with that?
Like if I, because let me
Was that
give
a
you an
yes or
example.
no? I
So
didn't.
where
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear your answer. Do you think that's fair or unfair?
I think that's fair.
Okay,
If you
and
have
that's what's
proof
going
that
on
you
here.
own the land, like if you have proof that you own the land and come up with that proof, and you would tell me that this is my house, this is my great 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 grandfather's house, and this is the proof
Right,
that this is his house, I would move out. I would move
right.
out of the house the next day.
I have a question.
Well, the point is, well, real quick. The point is that if your again, you just mentioned the whole point. You made the point.
Mhm.
If your grandfather and his father before that was living in the same area and the same property in the same community, and somebody came one time and said, "Hey, my great 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 says great 842 times and says you
Mhm.
got to go." What would you say to that person?
I would I would say, well, if I don't have proof that my great great grandfather bought it from your great great grandfather, I guess it's your house. I'll move out.
Okay, well, let's tell you what. Let me come to your place. Tell me where you live. I want your address. I'm going to come take your house because my great 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 European colonists had the house. Fair?
Yeah, sound fair. Come with the proof. I'll move out.
Okay, sure. I bet you would.
Cause I can actually tell you,
I
I'm
think you're. I
someone.
think.
I'm
I think
someone.
you're being. I think you're being
Before
disingenuous. You're not being honest. I think you're being disingenuous.
No, like because that's how we run our like here in the islands. That's how it is. If someone comes and proves to you that they own the place, because back then um the owner of the head of the household would bring other people to come and occupy his land, and throughout the ages um, those people that moved in the land lived from time to time and have children being raised on that land. So if the rightful owner of the land comes and say, "Hey, my grandfather made a mistake for you bringing you guys in. I want where you are staying right now.
The
I
point is
want
though
you guys to move
what
out."
you're missing is this. This is the part. This is the part you're missing though. The descendants of those who make this
Mhm.
claim were a very small indigenous population in the late 1800s in those territories. Let's say maybe 2% of the territory was made up of the people who were descendants from that land, and the other like 94%, 96% were other, mostly Muslim Arabs. And then those demographics started to shift. People from Europe who, because they have an ethnic connection and maybe perhaps religious, but usually not, to other people there, decided to emigrate and occupy the territory and carve out a larger percentage of the territory than the population made up. There's about a third of the population was Jewish, and about 55% of the land went to make the state of Israel in terms of the partition plan that took place. So I disagree with you. I don't know what your point of view is. If somebody came to my house right now and said, you got to leave because 2,600 years ago, this was this, I'd tell them to go walk off a short pier.
Hey, Chip, can I jump in here
Yeah.
and have a bit of a
Yeah,
conversation and
go ahead,
ask some
Chad.
questions?
Yeah,
Yeah,
please do. Go
hi
ahead.
there. Hi, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Ant-Man, did you say you're a Christian?
Yes, bro. I am.
You're a Christian, okay. So are you happy with the Zionists from Europe turning up and dispossessing not just Muslims but Christians too? You know, they I mean, these Zionists are brilliant with equal opportunities. They'll equally oppress Muslims and Christians. They'll equally blow their heads off, okay, with a sniper rifle, or bulldoze them with a tank, or drive over their bodies, okay. They really don't give an F, okay, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian. And you do realize somewhere between 10 and 15% of the Palestinians are Christians. I don't know if you know this. Most American Christians haven't got a clue because they've been so brainwashed with fake evangelicalism, okay, and they're raised on the fake Schofield reference Bible, okay, with this rapture nonsense, and that they must sing the praises of the people who are behind the oppression of Christ, and demanded his execution. Okay. Do you realize that they don't give a damn about the Christians in Palestine? How do you feel about that?
So I didn't come up to. I don't care who
You
runs
don't care.
Palestine. If it's yeah, I really don't. I'm just saying who are the rightful owners of the land.
Well, the rightful owners, you
They
tell me
should.
this. Let me ask you this. Let me tell you this. The Ashkenazi Jews, who are the majority of Jews in the world, they make up 90% of Jews in the world, are white Europeans. The Palestinians, Palestine is in Asia. Okay. Do you think it's possible and realistic white Europeans are the rightful owners of land in Asia? Because they're not Asians. You know, Arabs are Asians. Can you explain that to me?
This has nothing to do with race, bro. I didn't come up
It
here.
has everything to do with race. Listen, if I
No,
if a Ethiopian suddenly turned up, I live in England, yeah. If an Ethiopian suddenly turned up in England and he said, "My ancestors had traveled across here by ship 3,000 years ago. This is my land." Or the Romans occupied England for 200 years or nearly 300 years, 2,000 years ago. Imagine they came back and said, "We controlled this land for 300 odd years nearly." Okay. And there's lots of evidence they did. Okay. Whereas there's virtually no evidence of white Europeans, controlling Palestine at any time for even 1 second before 1948. So it's 100% to do with your ethnicity and where you're from, because white Europeans are not from the Middle East. Do you know Israel, what they call Israel, so-called Israel, these Zionists, they have the second highest rate of skin cancer in the world. You know why? Because they're not from the land. You see, people like me, I don't get sunburnt. I can go in any amount of sun. I just tan, I get darker. Why? Because I'm built for it. Okay. You white Europeans are not. You might get a suntan, but if you spend too much time in the sun, you've got to go running to the pharmacy for some sunblock, factor 50, to stop you getting burnt. And then that only lasts an hour, and beyond that, your skin's getting damaged. This is why the Israelis have got the second highest rate of skin cancer in the world. They're not from the land. Yeah. And the whole claim is fake. What you need to do is get out of your evangelicalism, or if that's the word, evangelism, or whatever it is, yeah, and start being human like everybody else and start thinking, wait there, my Christian brothers and sisters in that land are also being massacred, are also being taken, also being unhomed. You're not white. Okay, so I can see that now. All right, maybe you're not white, but what you're doing is you're supporting a bunch of people who've got no connection to the land. Okay, zero connection. By the way, I have nothing against white
Well,
people. My brother Chip here.
in fairness,
My brother
there
Chip.
are some people who are indigenous who do have connection to land. It's just a very small percentage of the current population.
Very tiny. You're absolutely right. It's a tiny. Look, a few percent of the Palestinian Arabs were Jews. The majority of the Palestinian Arabs are Muslims. About 10 or 15% are Christians. And then it was something like 1 to 3% were Jews. Okay. And the Canaanites, who are the Palestinians, are the continuous indigenous people of this land. The genetics proves it. The history proves it. These people have the keys of their homes. You know, when they get expelled, they take the keys with them. They carry these huge iron keys, and they've been passed down generation to generation because they have the keys that are to the gates of their homes, their doors of their homes. And so when a refugee comes in, you see, I don't know if you know how these Zionist Jews populated the land. They came as refugees after World War II. That's when the bulk of them came in 1945, 46, 47. Okay. They came in ships because the rest of Europe didn't want them. That's why they ended up there. Okay. And the Palestinians took them in. I mean, they were mugs, but they took them in as and were kind hosts to them. They gave them their land. They shared their homes with them. Then all of a sudden, literally like overnight, the Zionist Jews were arming themselves. Most of them had fought in the Second World War, so they were trained soldiers. The British were arming them secretly as well, okay, and sending them weapons and filtering weapons into the land. And then they declared war on their hosts. Now, not once in history has a refugee population ever declared war en masse on their hosts, unalived them in mass numbers, and then expelled the best part of 1 million of them. It's never happened in history. This is the first time ever. Normally, a refugee population is grateful to their hosts, and they work hard to integrate into that society and be a positive contributor to that society. And they honor those people who gave them freedom. They gave them they gave them their homes. They shared their land with them. When the rest of Europe turned their ships away, those same ships sailed all the way across to the Atlantic and were turned back by the Americans, turned back by the Canadians, turned back by Argentinians, turned back by even the Cubans. Okay. And you're asking about who are the owners of this land. Brother, you need to put aside any Islamophobic tendencies that you have, which stems from Christian evangelicalism, because they do instill that sort of hatred. Okay. And a true Christian would never, ever side with a Zionist. We love our Christian brothers, and we love our Jewish brothers too, as well, by the way. But we do not have any affinity with those who call themselves Zionists, who want to steal the rights and the lands of other people and then massacre now over 40,000. 70% are women and children. You know, and you've got to ask yourself.
Shaq, real quick. I know there's a lot to be talked with to let other people get in, but I do want to make this point. People keep saying about America or other places that have been conquered before, and why is it unfair for Israel to claim I get all those points. If you look at what the proposed resolution is to solve all this madness, there are some people who want all the land to come back to the way it was before 1948. I can understand that, but from a politically pragmatic standpoint, even the H group in their revised charter in 2017 said very clearly that while they're not going to recognize the validity of what has been created, they're willing to accept a two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders, meaning before Israel invaded preemptively towards the Jordan River, and also in the Sinai as well as the Golan Heights in the north. Yes, I know the Sinai has been negotiated back from Egypt after the Yom Kippur War. But the bottom line is, Israel's never chosen or desired to move out of that land. They want more, they want more, they want more. They're taking more land in Gaza now, seemingly going to annex at least the northern half, if not more. And that's what they want. They want more. They want the Greater Israel Project as a long-term endeavor. And that means taking all sorts of territory from Lebanon and Syria and Saudi Arabia and Iraq, Kuwait, and yes, indeed, Egypt as well, and about half of Jordan. These are their long-term aims. They believe that land is rightfully theirs under this grant that you're talking about, as far as the Great Book or this religious long-term thinking. That is BS. Modernity plays a role in reality and needs to. And if the Israeli government made the decision to pull out of the settlements, which is, again, 700,000 plus people, many of whom have nothing to do with indigenous population. They're from New York, Long Island, Europe, from Latvia, Lithuania, from all these other places, Poland. Netanyahu's real name isn't Netanyahu. He's a Polish person. So all these European Ashkenazi people are in a place that had nothing to do with the people that were originally from there at all. They're just immigrants. And now they're screaming they need more territory because of that historical claim with which they have nothing to do. How absurd is that?
You're absolutely right. Netanyahu's real name, Polish name, Benzion Milakowski, or Milikowski. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's Milikowski. They changed their family name. His father or his grandfather changed the family name to first. And by the way, they've used different multiple names. Nate was one name that they used to use before Netanyahu, so they've used various names. I mean, Netanyahu himself, or Milikowski, Benjamin Milikowski, there's a whole thing that you can read up on the internet about the multiple names that they've used. And this is why historically these Zionists for centuries have been known as the name stealers. In Europe, it's a common thing. They were known as the name stealers because they would hide their identity. And it's easy to commit crimes and evade capture and evade arrest, and avoid having your particular cult being labeled as a perpetrator of a particular type of crime. If you can blend in with your host community by changing your name, this is what they've done. Mostly all across Europe.
Can we let
sadly in the Middle East for the last
Court Size
century.
jump in, Shaq? Can we let Court Size jump in? Is
Salam
that
alaikum.
okay? Hi, Court Size.
Hello, Chip.
Court Size.
Good to see you, brother. You're doing good. I can see your app is doing good. We've been supporting you, and you've been supporting Palestine. I'm a pro-Palestinian. Thumbs up to all the sisters, to the brothers, everyone. More power to the sisters, to the mothers, to the brothers, whoever is in Palestine on the land. I have a question, Chip. I need to ask you, what makes the Zios, God's chosen people? I need an answer for this because I've never lived with the Israeli people. I never got along with Jewish because I am from Pakistan. We are not allowed to go to the land of Israel. On our passport says you can enter anywhere in the world, but do not travel to Israel. So I have a question. Why do the Zios spit on the Muslims and the Christian people? What makes them a cool or more good and chosen people on earth?
To be clear, not everybody who believes in Zionism is a bigot. Okay, a lot of people who say they're Zionists say so because they believe in the quote return to Zion. They believe to have a homeland for Jewish people. So in that regard, that is not a belief system. What they don't and sometimes know about or acknowledge is the harm that return has caused to those who happen to have been living there. It wasn't an empty place as they're told. And they may want to have what they want for their people more than others. Now, a lot of people are more hardened in their thinking, like the Netanyahus and Smotriches and Ben-Gavirs, etc., and many others who founded Israel, many of whom are not even, they're ethnically Jewish. Many are Ashkenazis, we talked about, and they're European settlers. And they said as much in their memoir and their diaries, that they're going to have to take land from the indigenous residents. And they knew it, and they did it knowing that the only way for them to get what they wanted was to kick somebody else off the place where they had been for generations. They knew it, and they did it anyway. That's what I take issue with, is the attitude of indifference to others to get what one wants, and all the subsequent horrific behavior we've witnessed over the decades, especially after 1967, which I believe was a big turning point for this, where the people who had already been scattered once because of the Nakba in 1948, and then they get further marginalized by an Israeli military that claims preemption and comes flying across the border and destroys the Egyptian Air Force and takes a ton of land that's not its according to its mandate, and then says it won it in war. Well, yeah, you started the damn war. They claim that Nasser waving his saber and shutting down the Suez Canal for the use of the Israeli vessels was an act of war against Israel. Therefore, they had the right to attack preemptively. Most people look at that and say, no, that is BS. You can say it justifies it, but most sensible people don't agree with that justification. And therefore, the seizing of that territory is illegal under the law of aggressive war. You can't just go take someone's property like the Mustache Man did. You just can't do it. It's not allowed. But Israel did it, and they try to justify it. And then what they've done to the people since they've done that with respect to that is what I really take the most issue with. The way that Israel treats Palestinians is worse than dirt. And between the prisoners or hostages, you want to call them, that are taken by Israel into Israel, who are Palestinian. All the things they do to make people miserable, from the checkpoints that are unnecessary to the putting cement or gasoline on people's crops, or rolling barrel bombs down the hill and then shooting people when they come out to put out the fire, destroying their homes, killing people who are protesting, shooting kids in the groin, picking off kids just because they're out playing in the streets because they can, just murdering people ruthlessly with no reason other than the fact that they can, and try to justify it under the guise of security. That's what I take the most issue with, is the abject cruelty and indifference that the Israeli regime and the Zionists, the hardcore believers, do to others because they can, because they have the backing of the biggest superpower that ever existed, the money, the material, and the political cover at the UN to get away with it. If there ever is to be a fair outcome to this, it's going to be accountability for everybody who supports this. Right on down to the last person sitting at home watching TV and laughing at the fact that Palestinians are being killed. There should be accountability for all of the people who have supported these crimes. The United States, Israel, and its supporters, I believe. That'd be fair. I have to end the live, unfortunately, guys. I'd like to go on more. I've been on this thing since about 4 o'clock. I got to get off, so I got other stuff I got to go do. But I do want to let you know I'll be on again on Saturday from 12 noon until about 3 or 4 p.m. if you want to come back. If you're somebody who believes in the Zionist movement, Joe's in the chat, you want to talk, come on up. Let's talk about this sometime. Don't be shy. I'll give you a chance to speak your piece. I won't be rude to you, and we'll have a conversation. So anybody who's been watching my lives know I'm the fairest host there is. And as long as you're not using personal attacks on myself or others, you're welcome to say whatever you want to say and have your time. Okay, everybody, just to let you know, this is being recorded. It's going to be put up on my YouTube and my Rumble channels, which are available through the link in my bio. It just says Linktree Chip Barnes. So when I get home tonight, I'll put it up. Should be up within a couple hours. But unfortunately, I got to go. I want to thank everybody for coming on as a guest. Thanks, Asme. Thanks, Shaq. Thanks, Quartzsite, and others.
Thank
and those
you.
Of you who watch.
Thank you, Chip.
Thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate you. Have a great night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, my friend. Take care, brother.
Take care.